Welcome to class number 5 of basic electronics. So first today I would explain this RC differentiator and integrator from a slightly different perspective, because some of you actually had troubles in understanding this inverse Fourier transform and Fourier domain. So let us assume this circuit, which is a combination of a resistor and a capacitor here. So this is basically a low pass filter, just as you know. This is R, this is C, and then the output voltage appears across here, V0, and this point may be considered to be the ground. So the equation for Kirchhoff's current law, for conservation of Kirchhoff's the equation for Kirchhoff's voltage law, or conservation of the sum of the voltage, gives us Vi equals to IR, which is basically the voltage drop across the resistor VR, plus integral of I dt divided by C from 0 to t. So assuming that the initial charge across the capacitor is 0, and this is the voltage drop across the capacitor, which is basically V0, the output voltage. Okay, now Vi divided by R is basically I plus integral I dt divided by CR. Now if the voltage waveform is sinusoidal, the current waveform must also be sinusoidal. So let us assume that this I has the form a e to the power j omega t. If I has the form a e to the power j omega t, then integral 0 to t I dt is basically a e to the power j omega t divided by j omega, which is basically I divided by j omega. Okay, this part is basically I. So I divided by j omega. So I replace this part here by I plus I by j omega CR. Now under the condition that j omega CR is much greater than 1, then under this condition this second term can actually be neglected with respect to this first term here. So in that case, if j omega CR is much greater than 1, then I is approximately equal to Vi divided by R. Okay, so if I is approximately equal to Vi divided by R, then the voltage across the capacitor Vc is basically integral of 0 to t I I dt divided by C, and I, as we noted, is Vi divided by R, so this one becomes 0 to t Vi dt divided by RC. So Vi by R is approximately equal to I, just as we noted in the previous page. So the voltage drop across the capacitor, or the output voltage V0, is basically 1 by RC integration from 0 to t Vi dt. So this is a different kind of analysis, but it leads basically to the same result in the time domain. We did the analysis in the time domain here. Similarly, we can do the analysis for the high pass filter also. So let us consider this combination, which is basically a high pass filter, and this is the capacitor C, this is the resistor R, this is Vi here, and then here is the output voltage V0. And this point may be considered to be ground. So here also we can actually do a similar kind of analysis. The total input voltage Vi is basically the sum of the voltage drop across the resistor, which we call VR, plus the VR or V0. The voltage drop across the resistor is the output voltage V0, plus the voltage drop across the capacitor, which we call VC. Okay, now V0 is equal to IR and Vc is equal to 1 by C 0 to t integral 0 to t I dt, which we have noted just now, is that this integral, under the assumption that the current is sinusoidal, this integration is equal to I divided by j omega, which is I divided by j omega c. Now, under the condition that R is much less than 1 by j omega c, or j omega c R is much less than 1, under this condition the voltage drop across the resistor can be neglected with respect to the voltage drop across the capacitor. So let us see why. This Vi is equal to V0 plus Vc, and V0 is basically the output voltage or the voltage drop across the resistor. V0 equals to IR, and Vc is the voltage drop across the capacitor, which is integral of I dt divided by C, which is equal to 1 by j omega c I. So under the condition that this R is actually much less than this 1 by j omega c over here, this V0 is actually much less than Vc. So from this formula, if V0 is much less than Vc over here, if this quantity V0 is much less than Vc, then Vi is approximately equal to Vc, and Vc is basically the integral I dt divided by C. So integral of I dt 0 to t is equal to C times Vi, and hence I is basically C dvi dt. Okay, so this is the current that flows through the circuit. So this is the approximate equation for the current that is flowing in this path over here. Now the output voltage is basically the current times this resistor R. Okay, so we have got an equation for the current. I is equal to C dvi dt. So the output voltage V0 is basically R into the current, which is basically RC dvi dt. So that is how you actually derive the approximate expression for the output of a high pass filter in time domain or through time domain analysis, and we see that it gives the same expression as before. The output of a high pass filter under the condition that j omega cr is much lesser than 1 is equivalent to that of a differentiator. So this circuit basically acts as a differentiator. Okay, I hope it is clear to you now. I have derived these equations without going much into the Fourier transform and the Fourier series. So I think this is clear to all of you. Now let us see a simple application of the law of mass action, which we studied in class in the last day. So the law of mass action states that the product of the intrinsic electron concentration, so this is the intrinsic electron concentration in the conduction band, okay, times the intrinsic hole concentration. So this is Pi is basically the intrinsic hole concentration in the valence band. So when I say the word intrinsic electron or hole concentration, it basically means the electron concentration in the conduction band for an intrinsic semiconductor. And when I say the intrinsic hole concentration, it basically means the whole concentration in the valence band for an intrinsic semiconductor or pure semiconductor. And this is equal to the product of the total electron concentration in the conduction band times the total hole concentration in the valence band. Now the first question which you may ask is why the electron concentration in the conduction band should be different from that of Ni. Okay, why this N, the total electron concentration in the conduction band, should actually be different from the intrinsic electron concentration in the conduction band. So the answer is just as I stated, that you can actually introduce let us say phosphorus atoms in silicon, and each phosphorus atom would approximately donate 1 electron to the conduction band. So if you actually dope your your semiconductor with phosphorus atoms, this is basically going to increase the number of electrons in the conduction band. Similarly, if we dope our semiconductor with boron, for example, each boron atom, just as I stated, is going to contribute 1 hole in the valence band. So if we dope our semiconductor with boron, the number of holes in the valence band is basically going to increase. Okay, so the law of mass action basically relates this intrinsic electron concentration in the conduction band and the intrinsic hole concentration in the valence band with the total electron concentration in the conduction band and the total hole concentration in the valence band. So let me write this terms over here. So this is the intrinsic electron concentration in the conduction band. This is intrinsic hole concentration in valence band. This is total electron concentration in conduction band, and this is the total hole concentration in valence band. Okay, so let us say that I have a silicon semiconductor and I have doped this semiconductor with approximately 10 to the power 15 phosphorus atoms, which are basically n-type dopants, 10 to the power 15 phosphorus atoms per centimeter cube. Okay, then the question is, what is the value of the total electron concentration in the conduction band N and the total hole concentration in the valence band P? Okay, so first of all, when we say silicon, what immediately comes to our mind is that the intrinsic carrier concentration of silicon Ni is, which is of course equal to the intrinsic hole concentration of silicon, is equal to 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube at T equal to 300 Kelvin. Note that this intrinsic electron concentration and intrinsic hole concentration for a semiconductor at a given temperature is basically a property of the semiconductor itself. For example, here we have said that the intrinsic electron concentration or the intrinsic hole concentration of silicon is equal to 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube at T equal to 300 Kelvin. This basically means that from whichever source I derive silicon, my intrinsic carrier concentration, that is the intrinsic electron or hole concentration of silicon, is always going to remain constant at approximately 1.5 times 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube if the silicon is completely pure, that is. Okay, so this number, this intrinsic electron or hole concentration, is basically a property of that semiconductor. Silicon is always going to have, or let us say pure silicon is always going to have 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube of carriers in the conduction and valence band at T equal to 300 Kelvin. Okay, for germanium this number is different, or for gallium arsenide let us say this number is different. But for pure silicon, whichever source we derive silicon from, this number, the intrinsic carrier concentration, is always going to remain the same at T equal to 300 Kelvin. So this intrinsic electron and hole concentration are basically a property of the semiconductor itself. This is never going to change. This is just dependent on the temperature. Okay. Now you may ask that why the intrinsic electron and hole concentration will change when I change the temperature. So the answer is that as we increase temperature, the thermal energy basically increases. So more number of electrons from the valence band is going to absorb the thermal energy, break their bond, and go to the conduction band. Okay, so more number of electrons can actually absorb the thermal energy when the temperature basically increases. So that is why this carrier concentration or the intrinsic carrier concentration basically increases as we increase the temperature. For example, we also discussed that at T equal to 0 Kelvin, the valence band is completely filled and the conduction band is completely empty, and the silicon would behave, or the semiconductor would behave, as an insulator. Okay, so at T equal to 0 Kelvin, the intrinsic carrier concentration is basically 0. At T equal to 300 Kelvin, the intrinsic carrier concentration is 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube. If you now go to T equal to 600 Kelvin, you will get a different number of intrinsic carrier concentration. So basically like that. Okay, so now it is given that the concentration of phosphorus atom in D is basically equal to 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube. So we have doped our silicon with 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of phosphorus atoms. Now we note that Ni is 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 and Nd is 10 to the power 15. So this condition that Nd is much greater than Ni is actually satisfied. So when this condition is satisfied, we have noted that the total electron concentration in the conduction band is approximately equal to Nd, which is equal to 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube. Okay, so this we have discussed earlier, because each phosphorus atom or each donor atom is going to donate one electron to the conduction band. Now we also need this concentration of holes in the valence band. So here is where the law of mass action comes in. So we know that NiPi is equal to N into P, where N is the total concentration of electrons in the conduction band and P is the total concentration of holes in the valence band. So P is basically equal to NiPi divided by N, which is basically equal to 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 square divided by 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube. So it gives me 2.25 into 10 to the power 10 to the power 5 per centimeter cube. So we have N equal to 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube and P equal to 2.25 into 10 to the power 5 per centimeter cube. Okay, now you may ask the question that if I dope, or if I introduce phosphorus or n-type dopants into my semiconductor, why is the number of holes in the valence band decreasing compared to the intrinsic hole concentration? So we see here that the number of electrons in the conduction band is 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube, which is approximately equal to the concentration of phosphorus dopates. However, the concentration of holes in the valence band is 2.25 into 10 to the power 5 plus centimeter cube, which is actually much lesser than the intrinsic hole concentration, which is basically 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube. So you may naturally ask the question that why is the concentration of holes in the valence band decreasing when I introduce phosphorus atoms in the semiconductor. Okay, so the answer is, let us draw this band diagrams here. So let us say we have this conduction band, which I call CB, this valence band, which we call VB. So now if the silicon is pure, that is there are no dopants introduced in the silicon, at room temperature or at T equal to 300 Kelvin, there would be some holes in the valence band. So let us denote the holes by a positive charge because these are absence of electrons. So there are some holes in the valence band and there are some electrons in the conduction band. Okay, so this is basically the intrinsic carrier concentration. Now we are introducing phosphorus atom in the semiconductor. So what phosphorus does is it has the fifth electron which doesn't take part in bond formation, and that electron basically has a higher energy. So most of those electrons are going to stay in the conduction band because those electrons are like free electrons, they are not bonded to any particular atom. Okay, so this phosphorus atom has an extra electron which would actually be contributing or increasing the number of electrons in the conduction band. Okay, but sometimes it may so happen that this extra electron in phosphorus actually comes to the valence band and actually fills up a hole. Okay, so hole is basically a vacancy of electron. Okay, these are basically broken bonds. Holes correspond to broken bonds actually. Okay, so this extra electron in the phosphorus atom can actually sometimes come and destroy a hole in the valence band. So to understand it a little bit more detail, this is what is happening. Let us say we have a chain of silicon atoms here. And then we have some phosphorus atom over here. So let us consider this typical diagram. Now let us consider these bonds as well. Now for the time being, let us consider that this bond is basically broken. Okay, so when this bond is broken, this basically corresponds to a hole in the valence band. And as I discussed last day, how electrons can flow is basically this. For example, this pair of bonds can break and this pair of bonds can reform. So electrons have actually transported, or electrons have changed their position from this location to this location, and this is how the electrons actually move through the valence band, basically by transferring these bonds. Okay, now it may so happen that here we have a broken bond. So this is a hole in the valence band, and now this extra electron from two phosphorus atom can actually come here and create this bond. Okay, so this extra or fifth electron from these phosphorus atoms, which did not take part in any bond formation till now, they can actually come here and form this bond between these two silicon atoms. Okay, so earlier there was a hole here, but now this extra electron from this phosphorus atom has come and formed this bond, and so this hole is basically destroyed. So this is what happens when you introduce phosphorus atom. Most of the fifth electrons in the phosphorus atom would directly go to the conduction band because they have a higher energy, but some electrons in the phosphorus atom which are unsatisfied, they can actually go and sit in the location of a broken bond between silicon atoms. So when they sit in the location of a broken bond in between silicon atoms, that bond is basically formed and the hole is destroyed. That is why when you introduce n-type impurities or donor type impurities in semiconductor, the number of holes in the valence band basically decreases. Okay. Similarly, when you introduce let us say acceptor type impurities or p-type impurities in semiconductor, the number of electrons in the conduction band also decreases. Of course, the number of holes in the valence band would increase when you introduce acceptor type or p-type dopants in semiconductor, but then the number of electrons in the conduction band would also decrease. Okay. So since n-type and p-type doping enhances the number of electrons in the conduction band and the number of holes in the valence band respectively, introducing dopant impurities enhances the conductivity of semiconductors. And as we discussed that one of the advantages of semiconductors over metals or insulator is because their conductivity can actually be manipulated by introducing impurities, or the conductivity can actually enhanced by introducing impurities. Okay, so if we introduce n-type impurities in semiconductors, the number of electrons in the conduction band is going to increase. So if the number of electrons in the conduction band increases, that basically increases the conductivity. Similarly, if we introduce p-type doping in semiconductors, again the number of holes in the valence band is going to increase, and since the number of holes in the valence band is going to increase, that basically contributes to again enhancing the conductivity. Okay, so we know that or we have seen the last day that the conductivity of semiconductor sigma is basically E times n mu n plus p mu p, where mu n and mu p are basically the mobility of mu n and mu p are basically the mobility of electron and the mobility of holes respectively. So I repeat again that if I introduce n-type dopants or donor type dopants in the semiconductor, this n here, which is the total number of electrons in the conduction band, is going to increase. So this part of the conductivity basically increases if we introduce n-type dopants. Similarly, if we introduce p-type dopants, this p basically increases. The total concentration of holes in the valence band basically increases, and so this part of the conductivity basically increases. So if we introduce p-type impurity, the conductivity again increases. Okay. So the semiconductors where n-type dopant are introduced are known as n-type semiconductors. So semiconductors containing n-type or donor type impurities. Similarly, the semiconductor which contain acceptor type impurities are known as p-type semiconductors. Semiconductors containing p-type or acceptor type dopants. Now what will happen if we introduce both n-type and p-type dopants in the semiconductor? Okay, so let us say that we introduce 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of phosphorus atom, and we introduce, let us say, 3 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of boron, which are basically acceptor type impurities. Okay, so we introduce both of them in a particular semiconductor. Then basically the question is, what type of semiconductor it is? So the answer is that the type of the semiconductor, or whether the semiconductor will be N type or P type, depends on what is the major impurity in the semiconductor. So note that in this case the concentration of donut type impurities is 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube, and the concentration of the acceptor type impurities is basically 3 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube. So we have a higher concentration of acceptor type impurities in the semiconductor compared to the donut type impurities. So this semiconductor is basically a P type semiconductor because we have more concentration of acceptor type impurities compared to the donut type impurities. So this semiconductor is P type because there are more acceptor type impurities compared to donut type impurities. Okay, this semiconductor is basically a p-type semiconductor, and the number of holes, because this is a p-type semiconductor, the number of holes in the valence band is approximately equal to Nd minus Na, Na minus Nd, which is approximately equal to 2 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube. Okay, so this process of introducing both acceptor and donut type impurities in a semiconductor is known as compensation doping. Now, if you have the question in mind that why is the concentration of holes in this semiconductor equal to Na minus Nd, this is because we have Nd equal to 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube, which actually contributes to 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube extra electrons. Okay, and Na equal to 3 into 10 to the power per centimeter cube of acceptor type impurities basically contribute to 3 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter holes in the valence band. Okay, so we have 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of extra electrons due to Nd, and we have 3 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of vacancy, which are basically holes, due to Na. So what will happen is that this 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of extra electrons would come and destroy 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of vacancies. Okay, so if we destroy 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of vacancies, what will remain is 2 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube vacancy. So what remains is 2 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube vacancy, and this vacancy is basically the number of holes in the valence band. Okay, so that's an intuitive explanation that the extra electrons which are given by the donor atoms come and sit at some of the vacancies that are given by the acceptor type impurities. Okay, so those quantity or 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube of vacancies are basically destroyed. So what remains is 2 into 10 to the power per centimeter cube of vacancies, and that vacancy is basically the number of holes in the valence band, and that is why the number of holes in the valence band is equal to Na minus Nd. Okay, so I hope this is clear to all of you. Now let us go back to our discussion on current flow in semiconductors, and we noted that there are mainly two components of current flow, or two ways by which current can flow in semiconductors. One is the drift current, where the driving agent is the electric field, and electrons and holes basically flow in response to the electric field. So the electric field exerts a force on the electrons or a force on the holes, and they flow in response to the electric field. The other component is basically the diffusion current, and the diffusion current basically is a flow from a point of high concentration of electrons to a flow towards the point with a low concentration of electrons. So it's just like spraying a perfume in one corner of the room, or as I explained, that putting a drop of ink in the water. So initially when a drop of ink is put in water, then at that point there is very high concentration of ink molecules, and at all other parts of the water the concentration of ink molecules is really low, or zero, let us say. Then as time progresses, these ink molecules flow from the point of high concentration gradually to the points of low concentration, and that is how this ink gets dispersed to the entire water, and after some point of time, or after a few hours, the entire water gets colored. So same is the case here, that if at some point in space the concentration of electrons or holes is very high, then those electrons or holes would tend to flow from the point with high concentration to other points with lower concentration. Okay, so so this diffusion current, we already discussed drift current last day, and I am not discussing it again. So drift current is basically E times N mu N plus P mu P into E, where this part is basically the conductivity sigma, and this is the equation for the drift current. Diffusion current, as I stated, depends on the difference in electron concentration, and electrons tend, or also holes tend to flow from the point of high concentration to the points of low concentration. In this case of diffusion current, the driving agent is not the electric field. Note that electric field is required for the flow of drift current. The electric field exerts a force on the electrons and holes, and these electrons and holes flow in response to the electric field. Okay, so electric field is the driving agent for drift current, but for diffusion current the electric field is not required. For diffusion current, the only thing that is required is a difference in concentration between 2 points. So if there is a difference in concentration between 2 points, then electrons should flow from the point of high concentration to the point of low concentration, or holes should flow from the point of high concentration to the point of low concentration. So this flow is basically spontaneous. So driving agent is the basically difference in concentration. There is no electric field requirement for the flow of diffusion current. Okay, so here the driving agent is a difference in concentration for the diffusion current, and in mathematical language we call this the gradient. Okay, so grad n or grad p. Okay, if there is a gradient in the concentration of electrons, or if there is a gradient in the concentration of holes, then diffusion current would actually flow. So here the driving agent is not the electric field, but the driving agent is the gradient of electrons, the spatial gradient of electrons, or the spatial gradient of holes. Okay, so let us draw this graph here in one dimension. Let us consider that this is the spatial dimension x and this is the electron concentration n, and let us just for the sake of understanding, let us assume that the variation of electron concentration is like this, the spatial variation in electron concentration. Okay, so it is higher, the electron concentration is higher at x equal to 0, and then as x gradually increases, the concentration of electron basically decreases to 0. Now so in this case, as I stated, that the electrons would flow from a point of high concentration to a point of low concentration. So electrons would flow basically in this direction, the flow of electrons. Okay, now note that the gradient of n, or the direction of the gradient of n, is basically this. If you are not convinced, let us assume an equation for n. So this equation looks like a decaying exponential function. So I would just assume that n is a e to the power minus alpha x I cap. Sorry, n is just a e to the power minus alpha x. So it's like a decaying exponential function. Okay, I am just considering for the case of simplicity for your understanding. Okay, so now gradient of n is basically I cap okay. Now these two parts go out of picture because n has only variation in the x direction. So gradient of n basically becomes minus a alpha e to the power minus alpha x I cap. Okay, so note that there is a minus over here, and then there is a I cap over here. So it is directed along the negative x-axis. Okay, so minus I cap basically. Okay, so I hope you are convinced that if n is decreasing in the x direction, the gradient of n is directed along the negative x-axis. Okay, so I hope now you are convinced that this is exactly the direction of the gradient of n. Okay, now as I stated that electrons flow along the positive electrons flow along the positive x direction. The gradient of n is directed along the negative x direction, and the direction of flow of current is basically opposite to the direction of flow of electrons, because electrons have negative charge. So this is the direction of flow of diffusion current for electrons. So we will call it Jn diff. Diff is the short form for diffusion, and the n here indicates the diffusion of electrons. Okay, so in other words, note that this diffusion current for electrons is directed, or is of the same direction as gradient of n. So gradient of n and the diffusion current for electrons basically have the same direction. So the diffusion current for electrons, which we again call Jn diff, this is actually the diffusion current density, actually not the diffusion current, but the diffusion current per unit area, because n is basically the electron concentration per unit volume. Okay, so Jn diff is directly proportional to the gradient of electrons. Okay, and its direction is also the same as the gradient of electron concentration. Okay, so we multiply it with q times dn, where dn is basically the diffusion coefficient of electrons, and remove this proportionality sign here. Okay, this dn is known as the diffusion coefficient of electrons. It's like a constant of proportionality here. Okay, now similarly, let us consider the case of holes, in which direction the holes would flow. So let us again consider that this is the x direction, and this is the concentration of holes, and again at x equal to 0 the concentration of holes is really high, and it decays as we move more and more towards the positive x direction. So again holes would flow from the point of high concentration towards the point of low concentration. So this is the direction of flow of holes. Okay, now similar as the previous case, this is the direction of the gradient of holes. Okay. Now what is the direction of current in this case? Note that holes have a positive charge because they are basically a vacancy of electrons. So the direction of current in case of holes is the same as the direction of flow of holes. So current will flow in the same direction in which holes are flowing. So now the holes are flowing towards the positive x direction. So this current would also flow towards the positive x direction. So this is basically the direction of flow of Jp diff. Again this diff denotes diffusion current, and P here denotes holes actually. So the diffusion current density for holes. Okay, so the diffusion current density of holes is directed opposite to the concentration gradient of holes. Okay, so Jp diff is again proportional to minus grad of P. Why minus? Because this diffusion current for holes is directed opposite to the concentration gradient of holes. Okay, the directions are opposite, and that is why this minus sign came here. So we again remove this proportionality constant, and again remove this proportional sign and multiply it with q dp here. Q is again the electronic charge, and dp is like a constant of proportionality. It is known as the diffusion coefficient for holes. So diffusion coefficient of electrons or diffusion coefficient of holes are basically measures of how fast electrons or holes can flow. Okay, that is how it is defined, or that is how it is related to the diffusion of electrons. So it is a measure, or it takes into account how fast these carriers can flow. If the diffusion coefficient is large, this means that the carriers can actually diffuse at a faster rate. Okay, or it can flow towards the point of low concentration at a faster rate. Okay, so the total diffusion current J diff, the total diffusion current density is basically Q times dn grad of n minus Q of dp times grad of p. Okay, dn and dp are basically positive quantities. Okay, so this is basically the diffusion current due to electrons, and this is basically the diffusion current due to holes, and the total diffusion current is basically the sum of the diffusion current due to electrons and the diffusion current due to holes. Okay, so this is the equation for diffusion current. So we are almost done with the basics. We have discussed that there are two mechanisms of current flow in semiconductors. One is the drift current and another is the diffusion current. And we are now ready to move into devices. So we will end today's class with a small discussion on equilibrium and steady state. Okay, so equilibrium basically means that there are no external sources of excitation except the uh, thermal energy in the surrounding environment. Okay, so equilibrium basically means there is no change inside the semiconductor inside the semiconductor, and no generation or dissipation of energy. Okay, so there is no dissipation of energy, and also there is no generation of energy. Okay, and the only source of excitation is the thermal energy. So what can thermal energy do? Again, thermal energy can basically excite the electrons from the valence band to go to the conduction band, and this creates electrons in the conduction band and holes in the valence band. So this is what thermal energy can do, but there is no generation or dissipation of energy. This basically means that no voltage source, or there can be no current flow through the semiconductor, and no voltage source can be applied to the semiconductor. No voltage can be applied to the semiconductor, because if voltage is applied to the semiconductor, then a current would flow, and this would result in energy dissipation basically. Okay, so since there can be no generation or dissipation of energy, this basically means that no voltage can be applied across the semiconductor, and no current can also flow through the semiconductor. Okay, and uh, this equation, which is the law of mass action, Np equals to Ni times Pi. This equation is valid only in equilibrium. Okay, so this is what equilibrium basically is. So you take your semiconductor and just, let us say, keep it on the table, and do not apply any voltage or anything. Okay, or you just keep your semiconductor inside a packet and just like that. Okay, there is no voltage, there is no current, and there is nothing basically. So this is basically an equilibrium state, and of course, as you can understand, that an equilibrium state is of no use to us, because if there is no voltage, there is no current, then what is the use of the device? So equilibrium state is basically of no use to us, but that is what equilibrium is. Okay, and then after equilibrium comes the steady state. Okay, so steady state basically means that there is no change in the device measurables with time. However, there can be dissipation or generation of energy. Okay, so let us consider the case of a resistor capacitor combination. I am giving this just as an example. So if you suddenly at t equal to 0, if you suddenly apply a voltage across the capacitor, then the voltage across this capacitor is going to increase. So let us consider this time, and Vc is basically the voltage across this capacitor. So this voltage across the capacitor is going to increase, and after a point of time it would reach a constant value approximately. Okay, so in this region the voltage across the capacitor is increasing. Okay, so since the voltage across the capacitor is increasing, this is not steady state, because we have stated that there is no change in the device measurables. So measurable basically means a quantity which can be measured. So for example, voltage, current, carrier concentration, these are all measurables, something which can be measured. Okay, so in this regime, since the voltage across the capacitor is changing with time, this regime is not the steady state regime, because the device measurable is basically changing. However, this regime is the steady state regime actually, because the voltage across the capacitor is no longer changing. Okay, so there is no change in the device measurables with time. Okay, so this is basically what steady state is. So if we apply voltage or current to any device or any electrical resistor, capacitor, or any semiconductor device, let us say, and wait for long enough time. So if we apply a voltage or current across any device and wait for long enough time, that device would eventually reach a steady state. Okay, so let us do up to here today. Thank you all.